My contribution as well, Mr. Chair. Before I get into clauses 7, 8 and 9 and over... Oh, absolutely. No. I know Louise Upson. She'll be up taking a call because she followed this bill very closely in the committee, and I'm sure we'll hear from her. Rather than chipping across the House, she'll get up and take a call because she believes in the importance of science and of archives and of library. But I just wanted to comment briefly, Mr. Chair, on Minister Ryle's intervention earlier about the importance of a strategic approach and the improved responsiveness that we were going to see as a result of what's covered by Part 1 of this bill. And it's difficult to take that too seriously because I suspect the improved responsiveness that we're going to see is that the new ministry will be quicker to say no. That will be the improvement in the responsiveness, because if the government's not actually prepared to commit resources to science, research, technology, innovation, then all of this shuffling of deck chairs actually means nothing. And I think it's important at the outset to say that we obviously on this side of the House are strongly supportive of science funding. We're very alarmed to see the moves that the government made in its early days and would like to see a greater commitment beyond simply the structural changes here, which, as my colleague David Shearer has said, do no harm as such, but don't exactly lead us anywhere in a particularly positive direction. But to return to the Part 1 and Clause 7 in particular, Mr. Chair, and it actually does pick up on the points that my colleague Chris Hipkins was making. In the committee, we did have some submitters who expressed concerns around Clause 7 and the way in which it constructs a hierarchy of criteria that will be assessed when making decisions about RS&T funding. And in particular, there was concern raised about the question of contestability. And I know that the Minister and Paul Hutchison and others on the national side of the House who've had a bit of involvement in this sector know that one of the really difficult balances in research, science and technology is the balance between stable funding and contestability. And it truly is one of the enormous challenges that face any government trying to work out how to ensure that we have those kinds of blue skies thinking that Chris Hipkins talked about, or indeed how we avoid the faster horse phenomenon that Moana Maki mentioned. How do we make sure that the new and innovative idea is taken up? And the concern was raised in the committee process that the way in which Clause 7 is sub-clause 2 is laid out doesn't give sufficient emphasis to contestability. Now, the officials, I think, made a good argument in the committee that actually the merging of the foundation and the ministry bring together a number of different types of funding, and that the foundation tended to have a fairly rigorously contestable process, and the ministry had perhaps a number of other different processes that they were working on, and therefore we didn't need to take up the idea of the submitter who came to us, who said that the contestability provisions of the Forced Act should find their way into this Act. But that is an interesting point, and one that the Minister may choose to comment on, because when you read through Clause 7, Subclause 2, it is true to say that it doesn't have that clear statement around the question of contestability, or the whole of Clause 7 for that matter. And I do think it's important that we have that balance of stable funding, and in particular we know that the CRIs talk a lot about the importance of stable funding, and contestable funding that actually highlights the possibilities of cooperation between different actors in the science sector. So I think Clause 7 as it stands now we can certainly support, but the Minister may choose to comment on how this definition and these purposes that are here actually are going to deal with that question of balance between stable funding and contestable funding, because I think it lies at the heart of getting our science system right, because we have to have the contestability element to generate those new ideas. We've got to have the funds that support those new ideas, and from time to time when the funding of the Marsden Fund is announced and there's some quite different and new and unique funding element, sometimes undertaken, research element, sometimes undertaken by the spouse of a former Prime Minister, for instance, or somebody like that, it draws attention from the media. But actually, those blue skies pieces of research sometimes are the things that give us the spark to generate both economic wealth but also social and environmental benefits as well. So I think this is an interesting clause 7, and in particular sub-clause 2, and I'd certainly like to hear the Minister, even though the committee itself resolved to accept the officials' advice in that area. If I move to clause 8, Mr Chair.
The Honourable Dr Wayne Mapp.
Oh.